succumb to our victory, we'd like to assure our residents names have been given to us. We would like to ensure security of the people.
مردم دروازه همه باز شده مردم میخوایم برن این دروازه دیگه این داخل میدان
Taliban is making substantial gains across Afghanistan. They have taken the city of Kunduz and its surrounding province. They say that they have complete control of the city, and local residents have confirmed to us that they are inside the police headquarters, inside the governor's compound, inside intelligence offices, the election commission, multiple government buildings. They've even taken the prison and released prisoners. The Ministry of Defence says that they are going to launch a clearing operation to take the city back, but for all intents and purposes, the city of Kunduz has fallen to the Taliban. It is a very significant city. In 2015 and 2016, it briefly fell to the Taliban. It's the only city that fell to the Taliban in the last 20 years. And the reason that it got back into government hands is because US Special Forces were deployed on the ground. But now, of course, US Special Forces are not on the ground, and the Afghan government is having to try do it alone, sometimes with the help of US airstrikes, but mostly through their own air force and their own troops. Now, the Taliban is also claiming that they have taken the province of Saripul. They put out a statement in it. They said that they seized a huge amount of weapons from both Kunduz and Saripul, and that they are asking soldiers to surrender or be killed. Also in the south, the province of Nimroz fell, and then in Jozjan, which is also in the north, the capital there, Shurbagan, is intensely contested. Residents there tell us that the Taliban have control of the city, but the government says that they do still have special forces in the city and are planning a fight back. Heavy fighting continues in Lashkar Gah, which is in Helmand, and also in Kandahar city. There's airstrikes, there's street-to-street battles around the outskirts of the city, and in Lashkar Gah, right in the centre. So a terrible time for civilians there. In Lashkar Gah, they have been stuck in their homes for a week, and they are starting to run out of supplies. We've talked to residents there who say they are absolutely terrified and that their houses are shaking with constant bombardments. So the government now being spread very thin as the Taliban take more and more control of various cities and territories. They're relying on their special forces and airstrikes to try to push them out of cities. But being in cities, it's very hard to fight because they are putting the civilian population in battle with this type of urban warfare. So the government in a very difficult situation now that the Taliban have moved into cities. The Taliban started this kind of territorial offensive right after US President Biden announced in April that all US and foreign troops would be out by September. Then the Taliban has started this offensive and taken initially a lot of rural land, and now they are pushing for the cities.
Let's talk about the Taliban. They've been fighting the government and its allies in Afghanistan for 20 years. Today, they seem stronger than ever.
The Taliban have adapted their tactics. They've gotten more brutal.
And now the Americans are going home.
It's time to end the forever war.
Biden wants his troops out by September 11th, and that could strengthen the Taliban even more. So who exactly are the Taliban? How is it that they have so much power? And why are people worried they'll take over Afghanistan again? To understand the Taliban, you need to know what happened in Afghanistan in the 1980s. Afghan guerrillas called the Mujahideen fought a Soviet occupation for 9 years. They even got money and weapons from the CIA. In 1989, the Soviets pulled out, and the next few years were pretty chaotic. By 1992, there was a full-blown civil war with tribal leaders fighting for power. 2 years later, a militia called the Taliban started getting attention. Many of its members had studied in conservative religious schools in Afghanistan and across the border in Pakistan, and some of them had also fought as Mujahideen. And they had their own plans for the country.
The people were so frustrated with this lawlessness, and the Taliban came marching along from Kandahar to city to city to city, saying, we're gonna make the cities safe for you again.
By 1996, the Taliban had seized the capital. They declared Afghanistan an Islamic emirate and started imposing their own strict interpretation of Islamic law.
They were like, you can't watch movies, you can't listen to music, women can't go to school, and other than doctors, they can't go to work. You have to wear a certain type of clothes, you have to have a certain kind of beard, it just became more and more restrictive.
Then 9/11 happened. The US was after al-Qaeda's leader Osama bin Laden, who was hiding out in Afghanistan with the Taliban's help. The Taliban said they wanted proof he was behind the attack, and when they refused to hand him over immediately, the Americans invaded.
The Taliban will pay a price.
Within a couple of months, the Taliban were forced out of power, and Afghanistan got a new interim government. 3 years later, it got a new constitution, and Hamid Karzai was elected president. While that was going on, the Taliban had regrouped. They wanted foreigners out, and they wanted back in. What followed were years of devastating conflict, and it's still going on. More than 40,000 Afghan civilians killed, at least 64,000 Afghan military and police, and more than 3,500 international soldiers dead. The US alone has spent almost $1 trillion on the war and reconstruction projects. And after all that, Afghanistan is still deeply unstable, and the Taliban are still a force to reckon with.
They're an insurgency fighting international occupation as they see it. They're fighting an illegitimate government in Kabul as they see it. And they're a voice of resistance to, as they see it, return Afghanistan to a more pure Islamic society.
Today, the Taliban have as many as 85,000 full-time fighters and training camps across the country, and the area they control has been growing. Right now, the Taliban control 1/5 of Afghan districts. On top of that, half of all districts are considered contested, which means the Taliban have a strong presence in many of those places too. And they control parts of some major highways.
Whoever controls the roads in Afghanistan, pretty much controls the country. They've managed to basically give people the sense that, wherever you go, you'll have to deal with the Taliban.
They're also well organized. The Taliban's leader is Haibatullah Akhundzada. He heads a council that oversees about a dozen commissions in charge of things like finance, health, and education. Below them are local officials in charge of everyday services. So in a way, the Taliban have set up a parallel state. They even run their own courts, which can be pretty popular among Afghans.
Justice has been a huge gap in Afghanistan, and where the state courts have failed, these Sharia courts are able to come into communities who may even be reticent to support the Taliban, but they offer justice.
All that control has also made them rich. According to Taliban members and a UN committee, they make close to $1.5 billion a year. They've always made a lot of money from growing opium poppies and the drug trade, but they found even more ways to generate income. Last year, they made millions from mining and trading minerals and even producing methamphetamine. They also have their own tax collection system and receive funding from abroad, although suspected sources like Pakistan and Iran deny it. Over the years, the international community has tried to get the Taliban and the Afghan government talking, or at least to talk about talking. There was even a meeting in the Maldives at one point. And during a brief Eid ceasefire in 2018, Taliban and Afghan soldiers were seen mingling in Kabul, even praying together. But overall, peace negotiations haven't achieved much.
The Ghana government has been incredibly antagonistic and sees the Taliban as a real existential threat to everything that they represent.
The Taliban have been quite adamant on their demand that they want the re-establishment of their regime that was toppled by the US intervention.
The question now is, what will happen when the roughly 10,000 US and NATO soldiers leave? Will the Afghan government be able to survive? And what will the Taliban do? Well, the prospects for peace and stability aren't looking great. Even while peace talks have been going on, almost 1,800 Afghan civilians have been killed or injured in the first 3 months of this year. That's almost 30% more than last year. There's also been a wave of assassinations that people blame on the Taliban.
Targeted killings continue. Civilian government workers, employees, but also activists and journalists.
It's to make people feel less and less safe, less and less secure, to sort of send back the message repeatedly that your government is not protecting you.
Afghans are already asking themselves what life might be like if the Taliban take over again. Will they rip up the constitution, which protects basic human rights?
Will women be able to travel without a male guardian? Will women be able to be judges? Will a woman be able to run for president? There's a lot that is ambiguous and unknown.
In a New York Times op-ed, the Taliban tried to clear things up, saying they want to build an Islamic system where the rights of women that are granted by Islam, from the right to education to the right to work, are protected, are in school, but not everywhere.
It's really localized. I mean, in some areas we know that the local commanders are a bit more flexible when it comes to women's education. In some areas they are not at all.
So how much support is there for the Taliban? Well, according to a major public opinion study done in 2019, 85% of people said they had no sympathy for them.
I've traveled to a large proportion of this country. The vast majority of people I speak to don't have a favorable view of the Taliban.
و اما اون طالبه که در ذهن من کابوس بد و خوابهای شیرین کودکانه مرا به یک خاطرات تلخ مبدل ساخته هرگز نمیپذیرم.
People may not like them, but the Taliban know what they want, and they've shown that they're in it for the long haul. So far, their strategy seems to have worked.